Hi, everybody. Peter Isler here with Marine Weather University. Thanks to your race organizers, we've brought in our famed meteorologist and my good friend Chris Bedford to help us take a look at the weather, not only today, practice race day, but also all week, every morning. And I decided to come in and sit in on the practice day to see what's going on. So everybody will still be a winner after the race today, but you definitely a good opportunity to see all those 70 plus boats in action out on the starting line in the winds that we're in conditions we're going to see. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chris Bedford.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Welcome, everybody. And hopefully, we can give you a good overview of the weather for today and the following days and prepare you accordingly. One of the truisms of weather in San Diego is that it depends on some very subtle things. In San Diego, the weather doesn't change a whole lot from day to day, and that makes the sensitivity to smaller changes much higher. So oftentimes in San Diego, we're having discussions about 1 or 2 knots of wind speed, where in a lot of other places that we sail, 1 or 2 knots isn't a whole lot. And from a meteorologist perspective, forecasting a 1 or 2 knot change in wind speed is close to impossible, but we do try, and so we want to look at some of the very subtle things that are going on. There's some days you look at the surface analysis, and it looks pretty easy, pretty straightforward, and you understand what the weather is going to do. There's other days where there's some unusual features and some tricky conditions, and as I say, subtle conditions that change the weather. And you can pretty much make sure on those days you're thinking outside the box and expecting the wind to be a different, perhaps, than a standard sea breeze day in San Diego. Indeed, today is one of those days, and we're looking at the surface chart here, and what we see is the regular thermal low over the interior of San Diego, of California, out here on the Colorado River. That's a pretty typical feature, kind of meanders around out here, shifts position over the course of the day. But normally it's lower pressure over the interior, and that's because it's quite hot over the California deserts. Also, we have high pressure offshore. That's another very typical condition. It's the highs further out to the west off the chart there. And so normally what we're getting is a northwest wind that sort of turns in and feeds the sea breeze into that low pressure area over the deserts. However, today we're analyzing a little bit of a low pressure up here to the north. And so our isobars are stacked up more offshore than they are along the coast. And this is a signal that we're going to have some lighter conditions today. And indeed, if we look at the uh, uh, the satellite picture, we can see kind of a circulation developing here. Our sun is just starting to come up here, so that's why it gets a little dark at the end there. But if you look at the circulation, we see that there is a little bit of a low pressure circulation up here to the west of Catalina Island. And so we do have stronger northwest winds out here. You can see it in the cloud motions. But in close to coast, in closer to shore, the wind is coming in like this and then actually moving up the coast in this direction to feed into this circulation. So this is actually causing a little bit of a southwest gradient along the coast there, not strong, around 5 knots this morning. And the expectation is that that is going to kind of work against us a little bit from the sea breeze standpoint during the day today. If we look at the surface observations, we see conditions are pretty light around us, 3 knots, 1 knot down through here. Then we have some weak land breeze stuff going on up the coast. And then you can actually see a little bit of the circulation on some of the observations up here to the north. Here's 13 knots well offshore, but only 6 knots in between San Clemente Island and the coast. So pretty weak onshore flow down through this area here. If we look at the Sorry, that's the wrong one. If we look at the surface plot this morning, this is the rapid refresh model, and we're seeing low pressure over the interior. We see those stronger winds blowing further offshore with the high pressure out to the west, but in close to shore, very light winds. Let me zoom in a little bit, and what we see is that marine layer cloud, which exists because there's an inversion along the coast will slowly recede back to the coast as the interior warms. But with that inversion in place, it kind of caps the sea breeze and doesn't allow it to build very much. That, in combination with a weak onshore gradient, is going to keep our sea breeze pretty light today along the coast. As I move forward in time here, we can see the winds start to pick up a little bit and indicate this is noontime here, indicate a weak onshore flow that gets a little bit better as the afternoon progresses and then backs to the left and eases later in the afternoon. So we really don't get a strong sea breeze flow, even though we've got a big temperature difference. There's other factors that come into play, the weak onshore gradient, the marine layer inversion. Those factors come into play that keep the sea breeze from really getting going today. Now, looking at it in a little bit higher resolution model, let me get back here. It's just difficult to see at this time here. This is the forecast here for about 8 a.m. this morning. It shows this weak onshore flow, and our coastline here is in the black. You can just see it. And then right here, right through here. And then our sailing area is right down through here. And we'll notice that these basically light and variable conditions can carry on through about mid-morning. And then right around 9, 10 o'clock, we should have enough breakup of the marine layer inshore to allow the sea breeze to develop in on the coast here. And then as we go forward in time, we'll see that sea breeze continue to increase. And right around noontime to 1 o'clock is where it reaches its peak. And then it fairly quickly weakens. So here's forecast for 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, and uh, what time is that? That's 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. You can see it weakening. So as it weakens, it might also go a little bit to the left. So pretty weak conditions. And that best breeze is probably going to be in the sort of 1 o'clock time frame. The other thing to keep in mind is that our course area is right down here. And so we have more pressure in on the beach up here, and it kind of back builds offshore, but there's probably a little bit stronger pressure up in the bottom of the course and up toward the right side, but always lower winds on the upwind top mark side of the course area. So if we look at the forecast wind table today, it'll sort of reflect all of that. And I'll just put that up here. And so we can see the slow build and pressure here in the late morning and then a peak sometime in the 1 o'clock time frame. Sort of from 12 to 2, I have 6 to 10 knots, but probably the highest winds will be in sort of that 12:30, 1 o'clock time period. And then we can see it getting lighter and more patchy as the afternoon progresses. So a good day to, I think, kind of get a handle on how the wind is. Tomorrow is likely to be quite similar. So some of the lessons you learned today may be applicable to tomorrow and perhaps even on Tuesday as well. So good day to be out there and practicing in these light air conditions. If we go to tomorrow, we can see again that light pressure, similar sort of wind direction, maybe a little bit more right on the forecast, but we'll see how that plays out tomorrow when we get the actual observations in the morning to see how it's going to progress. But again, another light wind day. And then on Tuesday, it looks like we have an eddy in place, which is basically a circulation similar to what we have up the coast, but a little bit further down the coast and causes the wind to go southerly in San Diego. And indeed, we even have a predicted sort of southerly gradient on um, um, Tuesday. And then that allows the wind to fill a little bit earlier. And then it veers to the right to come in more with that thermal component in the early afternoon. And maybe in this case here, showing a little bit, maybe a not extra pressure, but we'll see how that plays out when we get closer to it. The rest of the week looks a little bit better. We've got more favorable onshore flow developing in a deeper layer on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Not that it's going to be a barn burner by any means, but it does look like we start to see the sea breeze come back up into sort of 8 to 12, 9 to 13 sort of range in the latter couple days of the week. Peter?
All right, thanks, Chris. Could you put up the wharf image again for around noon or 1 o'clock? Yeah. So my takeaways here were um, windier on the lower part of the course, lighter offshore because really we should be racing in South Bay today. That's where the best breeze looks like it's going to be inside San Diego Harbor. And then being aware of a dynamic to pull the wind left. Now we're seeing right here, Chris has run the wharf model at quite a high resolution, higher resolution than the HRR that we all get on our favorite weather apps to look at. When comparing the two, both of them, as Chris said, had a slight left trend. The wharf under 10 degrees over the course of the racing hours today. The HRR was more dramatic with maybe 15, 20 degrees of persistent left shift. And I saw Chris put some of that in his table. Do you have any comments on the differences in those models and anything? What are the dynamics that would bring the wind left and anything the sailors can look for as opposed to thinking about the geographic pressure that you pointed out already that might favor the early right?
Yeah, I think I think the Wharf has a little bit better feel for sort of the shoreline shape. And so it kind of initializes the direction a little bit better than the rapid refresh does. So I think that that's why it hangs on to the breeze in a more steady fashion through the racing hours, relatively speaking, compared to the rapid refresh, which is bringing the breeze more left as it deepens its flow into more left pressure aloft. But as far as things to look for, well, basically, we're going to get the marine layer that's the overcast of clouds that's there now is going to be burning back to the coast over the next couple of hours. And then it'll kind of stop, and gradually a slot of clear air will develop along the coast and just offshore where the air is sinking to support the sea breeze. However, if that cloud starts to move back into the coast, or if there's any fragments of cloud coming into the coast, probably going to suggest left shift. That's going to probably, and also lighter breeze. So as long as that cloud sort of stays absent in along the coast and through here and up here even, then I think the sea breeze will be going. Alternatively, if we start to see fragments of clouds start to build back into this area, expect downspeed pressure and left trend.
Okay, great. Looking at tide models, we're at basically half moon right now, so the smallest tidal forces going on. This is the not high and low tides, but the current at the entrance to the harbor, which I'm getting off of Expedition. Um, the 8:30 a.m., a knot and a quarter ebb, and going slack at around noon, where the tide changes, and then max flood coming in, which is good news for coming in fast. A little bit knot and a quarter again, maybe 1.1 knots at 3:30. So slack right at around race start time for those of you that are have some sort of model in your mind of how the current might affect things. So the swell is from the west southwest today, so a little bit to the right of the wind direction. But an interesting day, and I'm Chris. I'm looking forward to the Tuesday, a real eddy.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see about that, but that's certainly the way the forecast is shaping up at the moment. Let's see if I can actually get there. This is the wharf's take on Tuesday. You can see a lot of south there, and then basically veering to the right as it picks up a little bit more pressure along in on the shoreline here, where you get some convergence on in the early part of the sea breeze development, and then it starts to fade after that. But that could be a very different kind of day potentially if that eddy pans out.
All right. Okay, everybody, good luck today. I hope you've weighed in the morning so you can party tonight. My band's playing from during the dinner around the pool, so make sure you bring all your friends. I've got a pretty great group of guys playing, and thanks to race organizers and San Diego Yacht Club. Chris will be here every day, every morning, and be a presentation like this to get your heads around the racing conditions. Good luck, have fun, and last 24 hours to go to get everything just exactly perfect. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Peter. We'll see you all tomorrow.